Coming up on this episode of Murky Sebs Wild Underwater Adventures. Wow, we stopped by the side of the road because we saw a sign saying Mary River, and finally we found a point where we can access it, and this is much further down than where we were a few days ago. And look how pristine this water is, it's so clear. We'll easily be able to see if there's any fish swimming around and hopefully be able to, if we get really lucky, see a Mary River cod. But look how beautiful this spot is. Oh, I'm really pleased. We were heading back and then we came across this awesome looking river, and look at all these cool plants as well. Isn't that just a perfect spot? There were several flocks of these beautiful little birds chirping, beeping and flying about between the treetops, occasionally coming down to the river for a drink. From this first glance we can see many different types of plants and algae growing in a deep, fast-flowing section of the Mary River. From under the surface we are greeted by swimming insects known as water boatmen because of their little arms that look like the oars of a ship. And swimming above them are various species of baby fish. At this size, it's very hard to determine which species these babies are. Some are likely the babies of these bigger native fish swimming in the background, which you may recognise from the previous parts of the Mary River expedition. Such as the big fish with the green, red and yellow stripe going down their bodies, which are the crimson spotted rainbow fish. And the long, thin, golden fish with a black stripe down their body are the unspeckled hardyheads. We also see many smelt, which are the thin, golden fish. At the bottom of the river in the distance, it's hard to see, but we do notice some bigger fish. Could they be the fish we've spent this whole journey searching for? The baby Mary River cod? I don't think so. I think these are a native species of glassfish, but are much larger than any others we've seen in the past. Just looking at this small section of the creek, I could tell this was going to be a great spot to investigate. Behind me, some of the locals have decided that this beautiful creek is a good spot to dump some tyres. Lots of tyres. I guess they assume that they came from nature, so let's give them back to nature. And also, some really considerate persons chucked a bed in here. Maybe they're trying to make an artificial reef. Certainly worked. Aside from that, this is a really beautiful spot. Lots of little birds flying around. Below the surface near this rubbish is a baby fish I don't recognise. It's thin and swims in a very erratic side-to-side motion. If you know what it could be, do leave a comment. Check out what we found here. Found something really cool. It's a really large freshwater mussel. And it's just down here. This one's been hollowed out. Something's eaten it or it's died. But look how big it's grown. Wow, I've never seen these in the wild before. Let's see if we can find a live one. Here's another freshwater mussel. This one, some really careless person has left on the riverbank. It's still closed up, so that means it's probably still alive. At least I hope it is. Let's go put him back in the water and see if he'll open up for us. These guys have a really interesting life cycle. Part of their life cycle involves being a parasite in a fish's gills. When they're ready to spawn, the big mussels will inject their eggs into the water when a fish swims by, and some of those eggs will latch onto the fish's gills and hang out in there until they get big enough to drop off, and then they'll start their life filter feeding on the riverbed. I think they've got a really interesting life cycle, and if they're closed, they're generally still alive. So let's get this one back in the water and hopefully they'll open up for us. It's really disappointing that the shameful locals feel such disrespect for this place to dump all their rubbish in this legendary river. There were so many freshwater mussels living here, unfortunately many of which had sadly been killed for bait despite them living for over 40 years and being vital to the ecosystem. There really isn't anything that can filter water as well as these freshwater mussels can. They do this by slightly opening their tough shell and poking out their little mouth valve, which sucks in water to their body, and all the little particles get captured and eaten, while the clean water gets shot out their exit valve. These were some long strands of algae, which shrimp usually keep under control. There must be a reason why we aren't seeing more shrimp here. We have found an awesome section of the Mary River here. Lots of plants, the water's moving nice and quick as you can see. I've already seen lots of fish. Let's just hope I can capture some of them on camera. There's also lots of freshwater mussels here, so we'll have to definitely have a closer look at them and see what they're up to. I'm going to move a little bit further down the river and see what's down in this section. Let's have a look together. If you look over behind me, there's a lot of plants and the water gets much deeper. It's maybe a meter, maybe a meter and a half deep. I'm sure there'll be something spooky living in there, so I'll have to be pretty careful. Not going to go in too deep, but let's see if we can just have a glimpse of what's living underneath that submerged log over there. This giant fallen tree made the perfect habitat for fish to congregate around, being sheltered from bigger fish and the fast-flowing current. This also provides a safe place for plants to attach themselves to and not get washed away by the strong current. The rainbow fish and unspeckled hardyheads loved this spot. What could this fish be? It looks very much like a baby Mary cod, but we're going to need a closer look, so I'm going to need to stand very still for the next half an hour until they feel comfortable enough with me to come up close to my camera so I can identify them. There are so many species here, from the unspeckled hardyheads with their golden body and black stripe to the Marjorie's hardyheads and crimson spotted rainbow fish with the smelt swimming alongside them. Finally, I'd waited long enough, and I can say for certain these are not the Mary River cod, but are in fact the spangled perch, which looks similar to the Mary cod, but they are much more common and don't get anywhere near as large. They only get to about 20 centimeters long and like to swim in schools, unlike the Mary cod, which are mostly solitary and can be up to 1.8 meters long. They're also much darker along their bodies. This isn't the end of this part of our journey to the Mary River. In fact, there is a second part coming out very soon with some really large fish and something very destructive that I was not expecting to encounter. So make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you for the conclusion to our Merry River adventure. And until then, keep it murky.